World War I is a criminally underused genre in gaming, not just for the war aspect, but for the massive amount of administration and management surrounding the battles. Now, I've had the opportunity to play a few hours of one of the most hype World War I strategy games certainly as far back as I remember, and from none other than the studio who once upon a time made Star Wars Empire at War. And if this piques your interest and you want to see more, consider becoming a patron or YouTube member of the channel, as all the support keeps this channel up and running. This is the Great War Western Front, a part turn-based, part real-time strategy game taking place exactly where you guessed, on World War I's Western Front, in France, Belgium, and Germany. Unlike many other games in the genre, Western Front is a highly focused game, centered around this particular part of the world only, and is highly reliant on tactics and strategy, but perhaps more than most, also on careful planning. You see, even though you get to see some crazy heavy bombardments like this one, there's a lot that actually goes into making that possible. And before we deal with these battles, let's talk about what's going on the campaign map. The campaign map is where everything of importance happens. Battles can after all be auto-resolved if you so choose, but you'll lose every battle, no matter if you play it yourself or leave it up to the AI, if your planning and preparedness is subpar. And let me show you exactly how this works. The Western Front is called the Western Front for a reason. Entente and Central Powers were locked in a slow-moving, massively high casualty situation here, meaning that every move and every decision matters, lest your front be left vulnerable and open for attack. Both our front and the entire map is covered in tiles, which every regiment and corps moves on, until they eventually and inevitably reach the front. Our front is divided into more or less important tiles, symbolized by the number of stars they have, essentially meaning how many attacks they can survive or how hard they will be to conquer. This means that battlefields like Verdun will be much harder to attack than a random farm somewhere, and that's a cool concept. The most important reason for being careful where you attack, however, is that every tile features armies, and they all come in various sizes depending on the tile's importance or where your plans lie. Funnily enough, army sizes are symbolized the same way as they were in Star Wars Empire at War all those years ago, kinda like poker chips stacked on top of each other. These cute little models do hide absolute death and despair though, and a massive amount of it. But let's look at the rest of this campaign first. In Western Front, it's absolutely vital that you balance your available gold with your available fuel. You see, while regular regiments will spawn in your capital every now and then, gold is required to buy special units, like fighters or bombers, and can even purchase fuel itself. And what is so important about fuel, you ask? Well, we'll get back to that very soon. First though, Western Front also offers up a technology tree, which over time nets you improved units and massive enhancements to your war effort. Essentially, technological points are accumulated over time, netting you 1 point each time. These can then be sunk into opening new advancements. Since each part of the tree is so specific and deals with various parts of both the campaign and the battlefield, it's certainly important to choose right here. I have to say I really enjoy the simplicity of this tree, and even though there's a lot here, it never felt overwhelming due to the way it's laid out and portrayed. And just like the tech tree, the campaign itself is detailed but legible. I'd say it reminds me more of a board game than an actual living world though, and I think this comes with a few consequences depending on your preferences. Western Front does indeed feel like you're moving pieces around the board, and less like an immersive grand campaign other games might offer. But that's the thing about Western Front. It's tight, it's focused, offers beauty in simplicity, and a potentially much faster paced experience than many other games I'm used to. Of course, I've only played the game for a few hours thus far, but that's my takeaway at this stage. Now, a small part of World War I was, believe it or not, also the fight the war and the battles part. I mean, several million soldiers did not live to tell the tale after all, and when you finally decide to move one army into another, a battle actually commences. As in any decent game with a battle map option, you're able to see exactly what you're up against, or not, depending on your spy coverage and intelligence in this area. This is another important campaign aspect then, as investing in placing intelligence down before a battle can provide you with vital information before choosing where to attack or defend. Either way, what's important here is yours and the enemy's armies. You always want the most diverse army possible, including regular infantry of course, but having tanks, artillery, fighters, and air balloons can actually turn the tide here. And of course, fuel is the overarching theme of Western Front. For as we enter the battlefield, your amount of fuel is the deciding factor when it comes to how many units and which units you may enter the field. The battles of Western Front are first and foremost divided into two stages: the all-important deployment phase and the active battle phase. In the former, it's crucially important to identify your advantages to the fullest. Here, you're actually able to lay down fortifications in terms of trenches, barbed wire, and even machine guns. And what I believe might be the secret sauce of Western Front is the persistent battlefield logic. This means that whatever you put down on this battlefield, and however it's affected by war, will remain so the next time you fight there. This gives the entire game a sense of continuity, a sense of personality, and as such, will after a few battles, assuming the defender has done well, make some battlefields iconic from the sheer fact that it's been fought over and fortified over and over again. And with this simple but genius little trick, Western Front does what arguably no other strategy game does in the same way, and creates a battlefield with actual history. Of course, shaping the battlefield to your advantage is easier said than done. Both teams, regardless of side, have command points they need to keep in order to win the battle, and therefore, both sides has the ability to lay down defensive positions and build trenches. However, if you're the attacker, you should have prepared well enough to not need the best defenses. You see, everything you place down will demand a fuel cost, and even though trenches aren't the most expensive, the fuel certainly trickles down, from the hole in the barrel to the ground, and as such, it's important to spend that wisely, and not waste it. Cannons will cost you a ton of fuel to place, and the shots will demand a fuel cost every time, but are vitally important for any assault, so it's just so important to remember to save some. But as much as you can, I found that it's important to place down as many regiments as possible, because a lot of them will die trying to cross that no man's land. And that's another unique thing about Western Front: the amount of soldiers that will die. I played a match where I must have lost a few hundred or thousand soldiers, but after the match, I was rewarded with a prize for not losing all that many. And it speaks to the philosophy of both this game and World War I as a whole. Regiments, your men, are expendable, and even though you might lose a few thousand here and there, more can be put to the front. And the most important thing, at the end of the day, is your ability to order them over the top and down into and beyond the enemy trenches. And believe me, a lot of men will perish in the attempt. They may also flee or be ordered to retreat, however, which is done by lowering their morale enough or choosing to have your men live another day. A tactical retreat can be a wise choice then, as long as you don't retreat out of your own trench and into bullet rain, of course. Even blanketing the enemy positions in artillery fire won't guarantee victory. It might keep them disoriented for a while if you're smart with it, but at the end of the day, it's all about enabling your men to reach the other side of the map. And that's ultimately what every mechanic in the Great War Western Front revolves around. The enemy has at their disposal every opportunity you have, of course, and I found that it was quite good at hitting me where it hurt, especially when it's able to know your positions, like the immensely useful air balloons allow them to do. What surprised me further was that either of the two sides can at any given time ask for a ceasefire. And I think it's time to face it. The battles here are tough as nails, and unless you completely overpower and dominate the enemy, you're actually not going to be able to win the entire field in one battle. Chances are you might be able to defend your point, or take one command post, before you receive an offer of partial surrender or partial victory. Again, this means that every campaign tile must be fought over in different stages, making each battle potentially easier to win if you won the last one. And I love the concept of such a meaningful tactical retreat or partial victory, where you always have to weigh your odds or cut your losses. All of this finally adds up to the victory points, which will be added or subtracted to your total score. Various events and decisions may also affect this mechanic, but when it comes down to it, the side which retains or increases their victory points will in the end win the game. And I like this concept, seeing that after all, this is just a type of board game style strategy game where this type of thing actually works. Imagine it as a kind of stability or national war sentiment meter, if you will. Now, the concepts and systems of Western Front no doubt range from interesting to legendary, and I love what the game is doing here. I will say, however, that there's a few things I would have liked to see. First of all, the visuals of this game does leave something to be desired, and I have no doubt that this is a game that in terms of visuals, could have been made at any point in the past 15 years. After all, it doesn't look that much better than Star Wars Empire at War itself. Second, it can be confusing to know where to click in the heat of battle. and how your units will respond to those clicks, and why. You see, I sometimes find it hard to know whether to click on an enemy trench or the enemy unit itself when I want to attack, and whether I should click on the enemy unit's little banner or the soldiers themselves, or if both is possible. I found these aspects to be hit or miss, and I think an upgrade of the mouse pointer when actually pointing at stuff, and the feedback one gets while doing so, would go a long way in making this more accessible and understandable. Additionally, sometimes a unit in a trench just wouldn't fire at the enemy, and I think it's important to know exactly why this is. Even though the Western Front itself was a slow-moving one, the battles of this Western Front can be fast-paced, and nothing hurts a potentially fun and immersive experience like a sluggish and inconsistent user experience. In the end, and from my time with the game, the Great War Western Front does seem like an excellent way to portray a distinct part of a larger war, and in a neat and tight package, which still manages to combine campaign strategy with battlefield tactics. From the few hours I spent with it, I found that what's unique about Western Front isn't the gameplay itself, but its concepts. A persistent battlefield, the constant back and forth, and the time period itself. I do find that some of the gameplay features themselves can be a bit finicky or outdated in the heat of battle, and I really do hope that the developers take these last few months to polish that second-to-second gameplay experience. Because when everything is said and done, the Great War Western Front has a lot of potential. It just needs to feel more geared towards battlefield fluidity before it can really come into its own. The Great War Western Front releases March 30th this year, and I'll definitely be here to cover it again when it does. If you're hyped for Western Front or if you have any thoughts about this video, remember to leave a comment, sub to the channel, and consider becoming a patron if you wish to support me further. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!